All right, we're on. So hi, everyone. We are here for our first interview for Zero Waste Month. Welcome to our annual interview series. This time we are talking about the Global Plastics Treaty, and we have three amazing experts and activists to talk about this really important issue. Please join us in the chat. So I don't know which direction I should point, but the chat is over to your right from the video. If you're watching live, please ask questions, make comments. This is to be interactive among all of us. So we're really excited to have our interviewees and our audience here, and hopefully you can get inspired to take action this Zero Waste Month. If you want to know more about Zero Waste Month, go to zerowastemonth.org and you can find out about our upcoming interviews and also some actions that you can take to reduce waste in the month of October. So we'll start off with introductions. I'll introduce myself. Hi, I'm Hayden Sloan, Strategic Director of Communications for Race to Zero Waste. I use she, her pronouns, and I am super excited to talk about the Global Plastics Treaty and to hear what negotiations could look like for a better world in the future. So I'll pass it off to Joe.
Sorry, on mute. Hi, I'm Jill Banner, one of the directors and founders of the Descendants Project, a nonprofit organization in St. John Parish, and really happy to join you all today and talk more about the treaty process.
Thanks, Joe. Alejandra, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Alejandra Warren. I am the Executive Director of Plastic for Future. My pronouns are she, hers, ella. And I'm really happy to be here with my dear friend Joe to talk to you about the Global Plastics Treaty. And I'm going to pass it to Ahmed.
And our new friend. You have to unmute yourself, Ahmed.
Okay, yes, thank you
There
very much. Yeah, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Ahmed Tiamiyu. I'm the Executive Director at Community Action Against Plastic Waste. We're a community of mostly young people and women in mostly Global South, leading change in communities against plastic pollution. Thank you for having me.
All right, well, we are really excited to have all three of you, but let's get started with a quick recap, kind of a debrief on what the Global Plastics Treaty is. So maybe one of you could answer what it is, one of you could answer what the negotiations have looked like up till now, and then we'll lead into kind of what your organization's connection is with the Global Plastics Treaty. So let's do a little recap. Who would like to start?
Sure, I can get us started. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to put some language into a process that's going to take us to hopefully reduce the amount of plastics that we're seeing in the world. How is that going to look like in a United Nations platform? It's really complicated. This is my first time in the United Nations. We just got accredited as a United Nations accredited organization with Joe last year, so we're pretty new to this. It is a very complex process. Over 170 countries are coming together to figure out how to get rid of all this unnecessary plastic that is just drowning our planet. How that's going to look like has changed since our first INC1 in Uruguay last year. We used to hear a lot of conversations about plastic pollution, ocean pollution, and all of this focused on waste, right? Fortunately, since then, the conversation has switched to, okay, plastics are not only pollution, plastics are created from extraction of fossil fuels. How are we going to acknowledge the entire process? So at this point, we are deeper in the conversations, trying to figure out how to acknowledge every single part of the life cycle of plastics, or like our friends at Society of Native Nations call it, the death cycle of plastics, because there's no such thing as life cycle. And I'm gonna let Joe talk a little bit more about it.
For the negotiations so far have been, I think, tedious. To really be honest, it's a lot of concentrating on language, concentrating on what's being said. We want to make sure that we have the most aggressive, assertive treaty that we can get. Make sure that what is really being addressed, especially in communities like mine that are in the fence line, on the front line of the production of plastic. So we're not just talking about the plastic that washes up on the beaches that you can see. It's also about how it starts off, which is when you can't see it, small micro, it's in the air. So my area in Louisiana, I'm in the middle of an area known as Cancer Alley. Between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, we have close to 200 plants in my community that are involved in some way with plastic production. So obviously it's important that we're involved in these negotiations, and we're making sure that frontline communities and these issues are being addressed and treated in a way that needs to be treated as we go forward with these discussions.
Okay, I think I did. Okay, I think your microphone is okay, but yeah. So I'll just make a little bit contribution to that as well. Like Alessandra said, right? It's one time, it's a lifetime opportunity to actually address the challenge of plastic pollution. And like every global agreement, this is going to be a game changer. Like for instance, forever, how plastic is produced, used, managed is going to change forever with this agreement. And like the comment from the UNEP executive director, she said during the UNITE 5.2 that this is probably the most important agreement after the Paris Agreement. And of course, it is also an opportunity to correct most of the mistakes, that you could probably have observed from the Paris Agreement. So the plastic treaty is very, very significant, and it's a process that everyone should actually engage, and of course to actually see to how it becomes fruition, because apart from the fact that it's going to address the issues of human rights, public health issues, environmental health, it's also going to unlock a lot of opportunity for many communities, especially vulnerable communities around the world. And of course, going to change how we're going to, also trade economic prosperity for every country around the world.
I completely agree with you, Ahmed. That's such a great way to see it, because this is a really big opportunity that we have to touch every single aspect that plastics are contaminating with that existence. And by that, I'm talking about the relationship between plastics and climate change, which is not really talked about, the problem that is causing to biodiversity. So the planetary crisis is biodiversity loss, climate change, and plastic crisis. And if we don't see the intersectionality between those three crises, we're not going to be able to tackle them in the right way. So what we want right now is a focus on human rights. Reducing the production of plastics is going to be really important. Unfortunately, we've experienced since INC1 a heavy presence of industry. I had no idea that industry had so much power in the United Nations. To me, that is just a conflict of interest that should be addressed. You can't have the thieves making policy, anti-crime policy. That makes no sense. They created the problem. How are they going to be participating in the process? So just being very careful that the conflict of interest is addressed, that a focus on environmental justice, human rights is addressed, and just making sure that all countries commit to reducing the amount of plastic that we are producing, especially the United States.
And exactly what Alejandra was talking about. It's so important for people like Joe and Ahmed and Alejandra to be at these negotiations because industry is such a big voice. We need the voices of the people who are fighting for, human rights and environmental justice and the rights of our planet to exist as it should exist, right? And without so much influence from our extractive industries and our emphasis on consumerism and materialism. So this is one of the things that we can do for Zero Waste Month is support these kinds of organizations that are actively working toward being that voice at these plastics treaty negotiations. And speaking of your organizations, can you talk about what your organization's role is a little bit more in detail with these plastics treaty negotiations?
Okay, I can go first. Yeah, thank you. But I'm just going to touch a little bit about what Alexandra was saying before she stopped. So first of all, it's important that we do not have industry in the room. There have been calls among civil society organizations to ensure that industries' participation were restricted. A lot of time they ask why, but it's simple. Those who are actually responsible for the problem cannot also continue to be negotiating because basically they'll be derailing the negotiation. So this is actually very important, and I hope that more people can actually add their voice, especially the government, to actually ask them to restrict. This actually has happened before in the tobacco negotiation. They were actually kicked out of the room, and you could see it actually has a very strong agreement. So I think this is actually very important, because I noticed in INC2 in Paris, and I was critically actually paying attention to this, over 600 delegates were from the industry. And many of them were not even in the room, but they were outside the room lobbying, saying, a very, very strategic approach. Like many of them from Africa who are working for companies who are based in different parts of the world. And you can see how many of them we try to say, oh, we understand this problem. We are also from the region, and this is not good for us. As basically just making arguments about economic prosperity, and a lot of time they do not understand that creating economic prosperity is very important, but a very good analogy is when you create a economic prosperity of about 20 million US dollar, for instance, but you create crisis of over 50 million US dollar, we have not made any progress. We have only been, actually going back, and this is basically what is happening. And a lot of time, this is what angle many people do not understand why they continue to make this kind of take this kind of position. But to quickly come back to the questions, sorry. So community action against plastic waste, we've been involved in the process. Before the mandate, actually, before the UNI 5.2, we are privileged to be part of the organization, from the conversation around the marine pollution, marine debris, then before, because this is basically what the conversation were about 5-7 years ago. It was basically about, what science are seeing the impact of plastic on the ocean and how we need to address the ocean pollution. This is majorly what the conversation started with. But of course, the power of civil society and public interest, organizations from around the world is what cumulated into last year in Nairobi, where the world member states, around 193 of them, agreed to have a resolution to actually address, a legally binding resolution to address plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. And CAPWS, as an organization, what we've been involved with, from the onstart was actually to, of course, accredited as an observer, and of course, contributing to the process by supporting, most importantly, most least developing countries. Those who most of the time they do not usually have the opportunity to have delegates in the room, or even they have challenges, implementing or taking back some of this, process, to implementing them or ratifying them back in their national jurisdiction. So this is majorly what we've been focusing on. And for instance, we have the privilege to be official consulting, supporting the Nigerian government, the government of Cote d'Ivoire, South Sudan, to help them to actually locally build capacity in engaging with the process, and of course looking at eventual ratification of the process, see how they can actually, of course, also successfully adopt them and implement them within their national existing law. This is because usually this is mostly challenging. A lot of time global agreements are fantastic because they can actually ignite many times a lot of processes locally that many times, because of the weak regulation in many developing countries, they normally do not come into play. But with this kind of agreement, this is kind of thing that can happen, and that's why we want to ensure that many of the agreements, some of the challenge with other previous agreements do not happen with the plastic treaty, and why we're working with many national governments to have like a post and pre meetings locally, and to build capacity of many national governments to ensure that they understand their critical input, and of course how to successfully adopt the treaty, and of course engage with it effectively.
I think that local connection is so important, and making, the framework of a global treaty is excellent, but if it doesn't work on the local level, then, what are we doing? And I think that local connection is a perfect segue to Jo Banner, actually, because she's working locally in Cancer Alley. So I guess, yeah, go ahead, Jo.
Yeah, our role in these treaty talks is just, as you mentioned, making sure that the impact of what happens to our community is shared. So many spaces that we enter that involve these projects, someone is there speaking on the community's behalf. So there's someone from industry who is there with policymakers or in these talks that is saying, oh no, the community wants it because of the jobs, and they are very welcome to this. We've seen this happen in our paperwork through the litigation that we have, where we have agencies or industry speaking for our community. So really being a part of this process, I want to make sure that what happens in our community is being shared and is being considered as part of the process. Because I know that we are a voice that often does not have a seat at the table. So it's important for me to be there. Also, what happens in my community, it's more than just a local problem though. What happens is it's an international problem. What happens in my small community, Wallace, in St. John the Baptist Parish in Louisiana, has international ramifications. The Port of South Louisiana that operates along our stretch of the river, just this quarter, I think exported or imported over 9 million short tons of petrochemicals around the world. And that's just one quarter. That's not counting what the Port of New Orleans or the Port of Baton Rouge or Lake Charles, what they in combination exported and imported along the river. And remember, it's passing through Cancer Alley in order to get through other places or to other places in the world. So just that figure right there shows you how what happens here is an international problem, an international situation, and we want to make sure that it's addressed. I also think the importance of sharing the connection of America's, in the world, but particularly America's history of enslavement of Black people, what happened through the plantation system, which is largely seen in my area and the history of my area. So seeing that connection of plantations to petrochemicals, to the production of plastic is a through line that we always want to make sure is addressed, is considered, is acknowledged. A lot of people, including our government, hide away from that ugly part of our history, but it's something that we can't connect because we're seeing the same group of people that was exploited by the plantation system and the production of sugar, the sugar plantations, those land being sold to petrochemical companies, leaving Black descendant communities like mine now on the fence line of petrochemical companies and the fence line of plastic production and the upstream cycle of that. It's a harsh truth, but these companies, they have to address it, and it has to be acknowledged that exploitation in a plastic space. So how do we make sure it's not happening? So that's what we're there. Really, we're there to ensure that all of this is considered in the talks as the science is being discussed, which is crucial, and the researchers are there, the scientists and the lawyers. It's important to have community members from the fence line also sharing that personal experience of or the personal impact this treaty would have on our lives.
Really well said. And I think those fence line communities also link into what Alejandra is working on. So go ahead, Alejandra.
Yeah, before we move on, I want for all of you watching us out there to take 1 second and just digest that information that Joe just said. Don't just start listening, blah, 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 blah. Just stop for a second and think. There is a system, a racist system in this country that is a very long story that the government wants to ignore. But the places that have plantations, coincidentally, are the places that have the highest levels of cancer in this country. Please think about that for a second. Think about that injustice. And plastic is part of that injustice. People don't think about it, but the plastic that we use every single day, that plastic bottle that we're like, oops, I left my bottle, let me buy a bottle. That's Joe's neighborhood producing that plastic. So please think about that for a second and think about how we as consumers perpetuate those injustices with our decisions.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. To just add a little bit of context to what these two beautiful women just shared. A lot of time when we think about plastic pollution, this has happened even in most communities that are most vulnerable, like in Africa, for instance. Many think it's just about problem of littering. No, they are largely problem of economic injustice and social, because think about it. Do you know that till today, a lot of countries, powerful countries in the global north, in Europe, in America, what basically they do is to actually collect their waste. They've been able to effective collection system. And do you know today, till today, many of these waste are being traded globally. It collects waste in your country. America today has the best known recycling technology. And they've been only since inception of production of plastic for decades, they've been only able to recycle 9% of them. Even though industry will make all of this beautiful advertisement about recycle, and they put recycling on their plastics and all of these things, but they've been able to do only 9%. Imagine a waste that America cannot recycle, then they export them and take them to the Philippines, to Nigeria, to Malaysia. Just think about, and many people in my country, for instance, in communities where I live, we have to walk distance, several kilometers for less than $1 with a lot of, plastic, because I don't know, a lot of time when we think about these things, and some people think this is actually working. I don't know, how do anybody think that this is working for anyone? Not to talk of the fact that many like around 25% of about more than 16,000 chemicals that are used in plastic production globally today are classified as highly hazardous chemicals. Many of them could actually migrate into food contact material. Many of them that we used to eat, drink, eat food. And to talk about the fact that many of them are also in toys that we give our children. So these are very, very serious issues. And you'll be surprised that many times when you are in the room of this negotiation, you see powerful countries like the US, many of them will come and argue against why some of these things should not actually happen. This is actually very quite unfortunate, and it is failing people all around the world. And that is why we need to actually really, really stop. As in, we need to stop them. If they cannot stop, we need to stop them. And that's why we need to continue to call out this injustice, say it as it is, and demand for the justice that, people, many billions of people around the world who does not have voice, and they deserve, justice. We need to speak on their behalf.
I have a couple of questions related to that. I think those are really good statements. And I think that bringing up the US as part of the negotiating table is an important thing to talk about. And we've even had a couple of questions from the audience about the US's role in these negotiations and in regulation. Honestly, the US is kind of holding things back. So, what can our individual, audience members do to help out? I know one thing that we have from Race to Zero Waste side is actually a petition to the US specifically to be a stronger player in the negotiations. And so we can put that link in the chat for folks who would like to maybe sign that petition as part of their Zero Waste Month actions. And then maybe you all can share some ways that we can push for stronger regulation and participation from the US's part. Whether we live in the US or not, right? This is a global player. And so it's really important to address these issues.
Okay, let me just quickly jump on that. One thing that everybody can do, to be honest, is to, from their space, to call on and of course to sign this kind of petition, and of course to us make sure that we demand by telling it as it is, with every opportunity that we have. Because I remember in Paris, do you know that around 2 days, I'm sure Alexandra and Joe, you could confirm this, more than 2 days and a half was spent, only on rule of procedure, because countries like the US and many powerful countries do not want a strong treaty, which is basically not acceptable. And a very good example is also in the ICCM negotiation just last week on the global chemical negotiation. I was sitting there in the room, and every time they talked about issues of global funding to manage chemical. Plastic is also chemical, by the way, but this is a very related negotiation. The US delegates, they are always ready to block every meaningful conversation without bringing any alternative solution. I think, and for countries who are, very powerful, powerful economies like the US, the EU, they need to lead by example, because a lot of time when they show up and they lead by, for good thing, a lot of other countries see it as a good example, and many of them will be willing to, follow in that step.
Yeah, I would love to add that we're working really hard. Joe and I, we're part of the Break Free from Plastic movement. We are thousands of people around the world, and the movement from the United States, we are working closely trying to change the stand from the US government is going to be really difficult. It has been very difficult because of the close relationship of the government with industry. Every time we go in a meeting with them, they have their talking points. So my advice for all of you would be do your homework. Don't let the industry brainwash you. They're gonna tell you, but how about your glasses? But your contact lenses are plastic, but your cars are plastic. You can't survive without plastic. You need plastic. Don't fall for that. We are not gonna go to take your glasses. We are talking about reducing the amount of unnecessary single-use plastic that is out of control. We are talking about reducing the amount of toxic chemicals that we're ingesting, all of us, on a daily basis. Wealthy people, rich people, poor people, Black people, all of us are exposed to that. So don't think that you're exempt from this toxicity, because you are not. So don't believe they're greenwashing. Don't listen, don't be afraid, like, what's gonna happen to us without plastics? We lived over 6,000 years as humans without plastics. We did it. We can do it again. And we're not talking about eliminating all plastics. We're talking about eliminating the most toxic, unnecessary plastics on our way to phase out all of those that are causing so much damage. So do your homework and don't fall for the belief that it is impossible for us to live without it.
Yeah, I'll add, and thank you, Alejandra, for just raising so many important points about not falling for the rhetoric. Don't let, we don't have to be boxed in. I think that has been one of the important lessons that I learned about the whole United Nations process and working with the treaty process is the power of language. And when someone tries to box you in a certain paradigm or narrative, that you don't have to go along with that you can create your own narrative or create your own truth, or share your own truth, I should say. So the power of not falling into that trap of what they want you to say, those easy answers that they already have contrived for us, we can push back against the government regarding that. So I hope that people, first of all, yes, do the homework. There are many resources online about the treaty process. So understanding what's actually going on, and then talking to your local officials about that, especially if you're in areas such as mine that is so involved with the production of plastic. What a good way to start to, to break the conversation, break the ice, if you haven't already, talking to your legislators and saying, well, I know that this is going on. This is impacting me. What are you doing about it? How are we pushing the government? Or I need your help to talk to this office, to talk to these different agencies that are involved in the talk or could be involved. So that makes a difference, really opening a line of communication between all these different parts of the process is beneficial to your community. And two, I think we are, in so many cases, when we speak of plastic pollution, the first answer is recycling. Well, we need to build more recycling infrastructure, or there's a litter problem and people are just lazy and they're throwing trash out the window. All of that, we just need to shut it down. We know it does not work. The recycling process, as was mentioned before, is not working when it comes to plastic. So that conversation, shut it down. The moment it starts, shut it down and start working for real solutions or pressing for a real solution. Doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but at least we can get the ball rolling on other processes like reuse that could work for us.
Yes, the point of recycling is going to have something that all of us are going to have to get behind. Recycling doesn't work. In the United States, 5% of plastic is recycled. It doesn't matter if you are the recycling queen. You can have 5 stations in your kitchen. You can rinse everything, rinse and sort. All of that they've been convincing us, sorting and rinsing, and all of that is the industry telling us is your job. And it's not our job. It's their job to stop making so much plastic. So talking about plastics are not recyclable is going to be something that we are all going to have to bring to the conversation. So what is the real solution? We have to talk about zero waste and reuse. And that's the role of our organization in the plastic treaty, because we have industry listening to all of us talking about zero waste and reuse and say, hey, this sounds like the new next thing, since the conversation around recycling is so polluted and so corrupted and people don't trust it anymore. What's going to be the next big thing for us to greenwash? And guess what it is? Reuse. That's the story of my life. Every single day I have to deal with the conversation of circularity of plastics. Plastics are not circular. If you have a PET bottle and you recycle it, it's going to become a plastic bag, and that plastic bag is going to become trash. It's only downcycled. It's not recycled like stainless steel or metal or glass that you can reuse forever. Plastic doesn't. So every time you hear about reuse and you get excited about reuse, but there's plastic, toxic plastic in that reuse, question it. Question the program. Question your city, like, can you think of less toxic ingredients? Can you think of other options that are not plastic? What's going to happen with this plastic at the end of life? How many times are we going to recycle this reusable container? You have to be asking those questions. If we don't ask those questions, then we are going to be stuck with a perpetuation of the system of plastic that is only going to be labeled reusable.
Can I add that really what Alejandra says is the continuation of plastic and the reuse idea, that we keep saying from my community, it does not matter if it's single-use plastic or it's plastic that can be used 40 times. It will have, that chemical does not know that, well, I'm a plastic that I can be reused, so I'm going to have less health impact. It all amounts to the same on our health. On the fence line, it all is the same thing. So we're working so hard and we're putting so much engineering and science behind, like, let's make plastic last longer. But it's that energy and that time could be spent for products and material that are actually safer. We're just it's time to really, as Ali said, please just let's break up with plastic. Let's just break up with it. Just understand that it will not work. There's no way you can recycle the toxic nature of it. You cannot take it out of it. So let's really spend that time and energy on systems that work, in the people who are working, the groups that are working, the organizations that are working in this field, because that's what our communities, that's the hope that I have, really. The hope and the joy is seeing systems that don't involve plastic that actually work, and then actually job creators for my community. So just so important, that point that she just made about removing this from the reuse system.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And as we, negotiate for these kinds of things, there is such a focus, as all of you have mentioned, on recycling, and trying to say that burning plastics is recycling, which we know is not a solution. Burning is not a solution. So we want the UN to adopt the internationally peer-reviewed definition of zero waste, which includes no burn. Which is from the Zero Waste International Alliance. So if you see that petition, definitely sign it too. There are lots of petitions out there, I know, but just add your name to all of them, because once one takes off and makes that difference, then that's what we need, right? But what I wanted to ask next is, in thinking about this economic disparity between really large companies that are there at the negotiating table and grassroots efforts, the people that we actually want to hear from, what are some of the ways that, folks like us, our audience members, individuals, can help support these grassroots organizations and people like you going to the negotiations and having that voice? Because I thought about going. I'm in Madrid. Paris is not that far away, but it's expensive, man. You take a train, get a flight, get a hotel, the entry fee. Like, there are all these things that are just economically barriers to normal people participating, and companies have so much money to be able to just send lobbyists, And so what can we do? How can we help that?
I would say that the biggest help that you could give our organization is exactly what Joe said. Reach out to your representatives. We were in DC in June advocating for federal policy to reduce plastic pollution. Is called the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. We visited 25 offices. 20 of those offices didn't know about the Global Plastics Treaty. These are the people making decisions for us. And when we ask why, they said, we only care about federal policy. How does that make any sense? Offices in Congress, senators with absolutely no idea that there's a global plastics treaty happening. But if you talk about plastics, what is my town, my city, my county, my state doing about plastic reduction? They're going to be saying, hey, we received 10 calls about plastics. People are talking about this. People care about this. And if you throw in there, because we know recycling doesn't work, they're not going to come back to us telling us, don't worry, because we're recycling more than ever before. That's all you can do for us. That's something that is achievable, is easy. It'll take you 2 minutes and it will have an actual impact. Because like you said, I think it's really expensive. It's really complicated. Our programs get left behind. We have lots of local programs, grassroots programs in farmers markets. We are working with almost 200 Latinx restaurants, helping them reduce the amount of plastic that they're using. That means I'm not there talking to them because I'm in Africa talking to government. So you can be my voice, represent me and our perspective when you communicate with your officials.
Yeah, okay, let me quickly jump in there. So I also think that it's important to also ensure that media and journalists are capacitated, to understand the issues of this type of treaty, so that they're able to talk about it, and of course give spotlight to people, activists and communities who are dealing with this challenge of this plastic pollution every day. Because this could also, help many governments to understand the magnitude of this type of engagement. Because to be honest, as important as this negotiation is, do you know that even many countries are not able to send delegates, even though a lot of time there'll be support for them, but many times, many of them are not able to send. I was following many countries in Paris. Some of them only have 2 delegates, because this is what UNEP is able to fund, 2 delegates. And you know what happened? Joe, Alexander, you know how negotiation could go into late nights, early in the morning. And what I noticed is many of them are already out of the room, because they've been in the premises from maybe 8 a.m. and by the time it's 6 p.m. or 7, they're already very tired. So they need to go and take a rest. And a lot of time, I've followed many negotiation, BRS, including SICEM. The most important negotiation happened late at night. And many of these countries were not able to have delegates in the room when most important decisions are taken. Sometimes colleagues actually talk to me that maybe it's deliberate, because, for instance, powerful countries like the EU, they have huge delegates. So they're able to have at every point, at every contact group, representative. And you see some delegates go, some delegates come, and this is very effective. But in countries where they don't have enough delegates, maybe only 2 people, they are not able to participate effectively. And I remember when the EU delegates asked for opinion, I think on a Wednesday in the middle of the negotiation in Paris, and they were asking civil society to share some of the thoughts with them. This is one of the things I brought to their attention, that it's either we don't let negotiation go late into night, because normally, according to the schedule, it's not supposed to go late into the night. It's only because a lot of time, most of the time are wasted earlier in the day. with many difficult, like many country blocking important conversation to happen. So when you know that it's Thursday and Friday is already here, and the plenary, the final needs to happen, and everybody needs to go home, and there needs to be concrete for everybody. So this, most of the time, the negotiation are extended late into the night, and many delegates are not able to be there when important decisions are taken. So this is one of other way that, you know, many people are disadvantaged, and they don't have people to be able to bring their voice to some of this important conversation. So I think a lot of way that people can, you know, support this type of process is also to donate to organizations who are supporting activists, who are supporting least developing country, and also, most importantly, to also get involved. Because a lot of time, negotiation is not only during the period when countries are meeting. It's also now, as we are preparing for INC3, already a lot of conversation are going on. So everybody can contribute to this process by taking the position of people and the planet that we all share, not, you know, advancing a position of industry that is always about profits and profits without care for, you know, health of people and, of course, the planet.
I have to jump into that. That was very beautiful. We're not doing only this for humans. Let's remember that. It all started with that turtle and the straw, right? They don't have a voice, and we have to be their voice. We're polluting air, water, soil. Plankton already has nanoplastics in it. Plastics infiltrated every single organism on Earth. If you heard recently, even clouds are loaded with microplastics and nanoplastics. This is a chance to be the voice of those organisms that can speak. So take the right side and make sure that you do your part. Don't guilt yourself into being like, oh, I had to buy the water bottle. That's fine. It happens to everyone. But do your part and try constantly every day. I know the Zero Waste Month is a great opportunity to embrace that spirit. But once you have Zero Waste Month down, just make it every month. What can I do? And home, the Ziploc bag, the plastic bag, those little things, clothes, just look at the label and think, this is cotton, okay, it's a little bit safer, because those microplastics and microfibers that are washing off your clothes are polluting our rivers or oceans. So make sure that your decisions reflect the urgency of the moment.
And I know that a lot of our audience members too have like done a lot of things in their homes to reduce plastic waste, which is great. And it always comes in cycles, right? So if you're listening and you're like, yeah, I did really well last year, but then I kind of fell off, like, now's your chance, you know, get back on the bandwagon, start reducing again. That's what Zero Waste Month is for, to kind of start new things or to get back into the things that you were doing before. So that's what I'm taking it as well. And I think I'll jump into some audience questions really quick. I think it's really good that you brought up, Alejandro, the straw, you know, the turtle with the straw in its nose that kind of went viral and started this whole straw ban thing. We've had bans on different types of plastics, whether it's because of its shape or because of its content, which is great. Things like straws in different cities, you know, across the world, and things like maybe plastic bag bans that have worked in places like Kenya, and with its pros and cons. And the thing is, though, is that in the US, I don't know if in any other countries, we have bans on banning plastics in some places. So how does this affect you know, these negotiations and how folks can influence their local policies and even global policies? Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, no, I was just saying, yeah, Louisiana is one of those places where the plastic, we've had attempts to do plastic bag bans and it's been shut down. There's even not so much plastic, but solar energy in St. James Parish, which is next door to St. John in Louisiana. There's a moratorium against solar farms. Yeah, because of the danger that it can inconvenience that solar. could produce to communities. So I think that's really those issues and these foolish, to me, absolute foolish laws and rules that are coming before us. We have to speak out against it. And when we see it, we have to acknowledge it. And we once again communicate to the government that we're going to push back. We may not win the first time. It's going to take multiple rounds of us going. This is a long fight. Okay, it's a long fight, but it's a fight that we can win. And as bad as things are in Cancer Alley, we've had a lot of victories. And that's because you just stay in the game and you continue to push. We refuse to go backwards. And once you get that hope and that determination, you'll find ways. Like we'll continue. We may get a setback, but at the end of the day, we're winning a lot. So we can win this. We just have to keep that in mind. It's winnable. Our actions, what we're doing right now, can inspire our families around us, switching to reusables, eliminating plastic in our life. I'm sorry, my dog, but yeah, it really has. It can make a change.
We love dogs. Our cute pets make appearances sometimes. It's totally okay. But yeah, definitely like those, getting in touch with local representatives and things like that can really make a difference. That act local, think global kind of thing. Did anybody else want to jump in, Ahmed or Alejandra?
Yeah, I know that we all want to do the right thing, and sometimes what we do is make switches, right? Like we try to reduce plastic by moving to compostables and fiber and all of this. But honestly, something that the industry is never going to admit, because the industry doesn't want you to know, is reduction is the best option that we have for everything. You don't need 10 Patagonia jackets, no matter how climate friendly they tell you they are. They are not. They are the main source of microfibers in our oceans, and they claim to be climate friendly. So don't fall for that. Reducing the amount of items we consume, starting with food, because we waste a lot of food. Everything we buy, everything we wear, everything we consume, less is the only real solution that can have an impact that is unimaginable. If you start counting all of the things that you are not using because you're using this jar of whatever pickles it was, instead of buying the new Yeti, that has an impact. So think about consuming less. We need to move away from this economy of capitalism and green capitalism that they're trying to push us. That does not work. Using less is the only thing that actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why the first R of zero waste is reduce, right? It's a priority. Go ahead, Ahmed.
Just to, of course, add to everything that has been said, reduction definitely it's the best solution. Actually, it's the first priority to advocate for a global capping on production of plastic, because as it is right now, plastic has been projected to double in production, which is unbelievable. Looking at the already problem that the crisis that we have at our hand, and imagine industries still projecting to produce more and more plastic. A lot of time, they talked about it because it is convenience, it is civilization. Convenience for who? Honestly, convenient for who? It's a lot of time, this is what they make customers to think it's no, it's not because it's convenient for the customer. It's because it is convenient for them to sell more and more and more. That's why they continue to produce them. It's not because it's convenient for the customer. If it is because of the customer, for instance, I've always had many alternatives to use either their products or use other alternative products. They don't have to use our products. But because the company probably wanted to sell more and more, so this is why they make all of this story to look as if it is the consumer that is demanding more and more and more, even though when a lot of time they do not consider the benefit of the consumer in this production. For instance, in food contact material, there are a lot of chemical that lays with them that are very hazardous. So how is this now convenient? How is this good for the customer? So a lot of time, this is what they do not make the customers to understand. Why many think, okay, maybe this is good and it is convenient. And of course, you see the advertisements, they make the bottle to look cool and everybody think, oh, okay, we have now made progress. But this is honestly the brainwashing that, you know, it's going on, that we all need to stop and of course take a serious reflection so that we do not continue on a path of development that, you know, threatening our health, harming the planet that we all share, and of course does not guarantee a safe future for our children and generations to come.
I think that's extremely well said. Reducing overall production is such an important point of this treaty. And that's something that, you know, we're all going to keep fighting for, and hopefully the folks in our audience as well. We're coming up to the end of our time. Thank you so much for joining us, to our speakers and to our audience members for all of your questions. Hopefully we answered some of those through our discussion. We had a couple of them that we explicitly brought out, but thank you so much for those. And I'll just give all of you, you know, a last, you know, comment or suggestion for how we can support this treaty in the future, and what's the biggest thing that we can do as part of Zero Waste Month to reduce our waste and to make sure that this treaty becomes, you know, a strong international, you know, tool for reducing plastic. Whatever your last messages are. Alejandro, you want to go first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go, Allie.
No, I think we said a lot of what you can do. Something really specific, start bringing your container, your cup for takeout. That's huge. A really big percentage of the plastic we're finding. And now Europe has a paper problem because they switched to paper. So now they have the paper problem. And when we didn't think about, those are also trees. So sometimes the easiest solution is the best solution. And again, that's something that the industry is not going to let you know because it's not convenient for them, because there's no profit, because there's no growth. And when there's no profit and growth in capitalism, they don't tell us about it. But we have those solutions. Your grandma probably has all the solutions. If you're a person of color, you probably have so many solutions because you believe in that sense of respecting resources. So embrace that knowledge. That knowledge has a lot of value. And that's the best thing you can do to support this treaty.
Yeah, I'll just echo that, you know, whether it's plastics or paper, anything single use, even compostable, anything single use is not the answer. All right, Joe? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ahmed.
Absolutely. Single use, because how does it even make any sense to produce, take, you know, many hours to produce something, and it only take few seconds to use it and throw it away? So this does not benefit anyone. It's only harming our communities and of course harming our health. So single use, whether it is whatever material you want to talk about, it's no for single use. So we need to embrace, and the good thing about embracing reuse system is when you actually make products to be reused, they also create another economic opportunity in repair system for other people, you know, and of course, they also guarantee the fact that that product is also better invest in, because a lot of time why you see a lot of single-use products is because it is cheap for the industry. Remember, when, for instance, soft drink used to be bottled, you know, in glass bottles, they make sure that they have a return system because they are expensive, but deposit system was mandatory because those things were very expensive for them to reproduce. And of course, they want to continue to be able to produce the volume that they are producing. But because plastic are very cheap, and it costs them little to actually produce them and throw away. That's why you see, the fact that millions of them wanted to be produced and nobody wants to take responsibility for them. Because how do you manage, millions, billions of these products being sold every single day? It's just basically impossible. So that's why there needs to be, first of all, reduction that matches the infrastructure to manage. At least it's a place to start, to ensure that every country have a cap for what they can be able to manage, for what they are going to be allowed to be produced in those countries. And that can be a place to start. And to quickly just add on to that, definitely there's no such thing as secular plastic, because as it is right now, plastic has a lot of toxicity that even those who are working in recycling system or with them, they are exposed to a lot of toxicity. So it's basically not doable and a bit difficult to go that way. Thank you.
All right, we're a little bit past the hour, but Joe, did you want to add some last comments before we go?
Yeah, I want to add that I think we are, as we talk about reuse and knowing these systems that will help us out, being a good steward and stewarding objects, stewarding our bottles and our utensils, that we're taking care of them. We're taking care. It's a way of caring. So we're showing care for yourself. It's a way of showing care for the situation that's happening in Cancer Alley and on other places in the world, and just making sure you're taking a little bit more time to do something that is so beneficial for communities like mine, in a selfish way, if I put it out there. But this is a way that I think when we can take care of something, and it doesn't, we can have texture in our lives. We can have, everything has to be clean and shiny, well, clean and clear like plastic is. It's a coating over our lives. So I think really understanding what these different textures and experiences are in these systems of reuse that are part of the solution, it's an exciting time. It's a joyful time for us. So reduction of what we're using what we already have, and also figuring out like, okay, I can use this product in a new way that I never thought about, and also makes me a good steward. It's a certain joy that has brought me in my life. I know I have really embraced this and I'm trying my best. I'm not perfect. It's a work in progress, but even learning about it, I've enjoyed the experience of learning all of these new ways, which in a lot of ways are old ways of moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing, that it's not perfection, from the get-go, for sure. Nobody's perfect, but every little thing that we can do counts. And I love that idea of like that care and love and stewardship. Like, it's a joyful thing to keep something and maintain it for 20, 30, 40 years. That's, I cherish the things that I have from my grandma, for example. Like, even if it's just a ring or, some piece of jewelry, that's amazing. Why can't we do that with, other things? My mom has dishes from her great aunt. Amazing. And we use them and it's phenomenal. And I think that idea of love is so important in this. Thank you so much, Joe. I think that's a great final thought. I know we're a little bit past the hour. We did have one more question, if you're both able to stay on. I know Alejandra had to leave, but I'll leave it up to you to stay or say goodbye. One more?
Fine, you could just quickly. Yeah.
All right. So we have a question about contaminated water in specific communities that don't have access to fresh water. Maybe they don't have a refill option, for example, and plastic bottle is the only way that they can get fresh water. What do we do about that? Is that a thing that the Global Plastics Treaty will cut out? Like, will we leave communities without water? What is the environmental justice aspect that we can tackle? How can we angle this kind of discussion?
Yeah, for me, I mean, we've had hurricanes and we've been without water. We're actually right now facing a saltwater wedge that's coming up the Mississippi River. So that is a real concern for us. Water does not have to come in bottles. So that's the first thing. You can get something that's called like water tanks are water buffaloes, where you could provide the water and ask people to bring their own containers. Even if it may be a gallon jug, although it's still plastic, but it's not as much plastic as the plastic bottles. So those solutions where we're bringing in the water, and people will have containers. I bet they will find ways to get that water from their homes. We just have to provide the water. So that's for me, and we're working on solutions too right now at this moment of how do we get the water without utilizing plastic bottles.
Yeah, I think anything, if you can get it in bulk, if it needs to be in plastic, at least a bigger container is a temporary solution for now. Yeah. Ahmed, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. It's always a very difficult conversation to have. Like, for instance, in Nigeria, there's something called pure water, a sachet bag of water. And this is a lot of time, this is the most easily accessible water to many of our population. So when you talked about banning some of this material, a lot of conversation around, oh, okay, how are people going to get water and all of this? Yeah, these are very difficult conversations to have. But first of all, is actually to regulate their production, to ensure that for those that continue to be in use, they continue to be safe for people to use. That's number one. It's very important that they are regulated so that they are very safe. But when you talked about, immediate banning of plastic, we're talking about unnecessary ones like straw, like cutleries, many of them that people can easily do away with. But for those that actually can be a bit critical, they need to be regulated. And of course, ensure that they continue to be used in a way that they are safe for people. And of course, refuel is always a very good option to go with. Yes, it might seem to be undoable, but definitely it is doable, and it should be an option that should be strongly considered.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and Alejandra and Joe have had to jump off, but for those who were able to stay a little over the hour, and to Ahmed especially, thank you so much. Thank you for staying up with us. I know it's later in the evening for you, so I appreciate that as well. And for anyone who has any further questions, you can definitely get in touch with us, send us a message on Instagram or on Facebook. You have the handles in the chat for our participants here, for our interviewees. And so please reach out and support these grassroots initiatives that are trying to get these really important, plastics, toxics issues to the table, to the negotiation table. So thank you everyone for joining us. Join us again next Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Central European time for Making Refill Happen. That's going to be our second interview of the week. So ties right in. We just ended on refill, and now we'll continue with refill for next week. We're very excited to have that conversation as well. Keep working and sharing your actions for Zero Waste Month, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.